You have made it to Part 3, Unraveled, Chapter 12, The New Normal. The pandemic effectively destroyed normalcy and successfully replaced it with a new normal that is difficult to articulate. Social distancing, plexiglass dividers, mask requirements, distance learning, absentee voting, streaming new films, updated and more efficient delivery systems, and a new understanding of the purpose behind sick days are all elements that have some sticking power in the minds of Americans. But there is also a more elusive and slippery understanding of what this new normal entails, with tendrils of fear and suspicion wrapping around the part of the brain that deals with higher thinking, with presumed hostility toward anyone who is other, with distrust toward one's neighbor, with the negative economic impact. This new normal constantly whispers despair into the minds of Americans and quietly chokes out hope for a better future. This has been reinforced by a war in Europe, apathy toward those fighting for liberty, notably in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Afghanistan, China, and Iran, and a focus on planet destruction. Americans did not return to their previously held values, did not regain their globally recognized American optimism, and have yet to celebrate the wonder of being alive after a season of death. In fact, Americans are still adrift, or adrift again, as we're told that we have returned to normal, right? This is normal. The pandemic is a thing of the past, but our anxiety remains. And we are looking for another object to which to assign that anxiety. I think many people thought it might be the climate crisis, or maybe it was supposed to be MAGA Republicans, or maybe it's the border crisis. Maybe it should be artificial intelligence. Is it still white supremacy, or maybe guns? I'm not sure. There's nothing we can all really coalesce around today like we did with the pandemic. But even though the powers that be, or the media and everyone, is basically urging us to memory hole all the measures taken against our freedom, and even as they're asking us to put it all in the rearview mirror and look ahead and stop looking back at all that, evidence still remains about this era. I mean, the targeting of people with the wrong opinions, this hyper focus on democracy, the orders being passed in places like New York and California, and the lawsuits in places like Florida and Arizona. I mean, the Constitution is still shredded. There's no checking of the power of our government in DC. There's no equality under the law. Many parts of civil society have been eliminated. They have not returned, even though we've been told we're back to normal. Relationships are still broken. Families are still broken. The economy is still operating under the effects of the pandemic and the mitigation measures. And the government and media still act and talk as though life and people are the same as they always have been, as they were in 2020, but also as they were in 2019. A lot has been asked of us as we transitioned to this new normal we don't even realize already has a grip on us. Not only were we asked to shift our perspective from one of liberty and individuality to one of safety and the greater good, but we are asked to shift our belief systems away from faith in God and trust in our fellow man, and toward faith and trust in the reliability of experts and the institutions that they exist in, or were birthed from: medical, health, academic, research, media, and government. We are told that answers will come from the creator of the problems. We believed them before. I mean, how many of us are still believing this, that the answers are going to come from the creator of the problems? Amazingly, I actually see most people still believe this. They still believe the answers can be found in their political party, their favored candidate, the institution, science, medicine. They still believe this, big tech even. I see this evidence on social media like X, but I also see it in conversations with people who did comply until it was over and saw no real government overreach at all in the meantime. I think they wanted to be on the right side of history, and in their minds, They are, and they still are. A new religion. The pandemic put new or revived phrases into the American lexicon like, follow the science. First, they instilled a fear of suffering and dying into the already anxiety-laden society. They saturated the airwaves, political speeches, corporate meetings, government offices with a fear of death. Then they offered a solution. Science. People have always died, people have always suffered and then died, and in previous health crises, governments and media alike urged calm and empathy and prayers. This time, however, they instead focused on the suffering and death, and for some reason, through this new focus, the American people became convinced that science could somehow now save them from the inevitable. Reliability of science. Science is the pursuit of truth or the pursuit of knowledge, and it involves the recognition of a problem, the collection of data, and the formulation and testing of hypotheses. But our collective understanding of science has evolved over time to something that is not science at all. We, as a society, no longer look at science as using a systematic approach to try to prove or disprove ideas or facts. Instead, consciously or not, we are equating science with the social institution of science and the practitioners of science, scientists, not the actual work that is being done. History has shown, however, that scientific institutions are fairly unreliable. For example, if comparing Mendelian genetics versus Mengelian genetics or even Soviet genetics, which institution had the authority to declare which is the better science? The institution in and of itself is not reliable at all. It does not even matter if there is consensus. Consensus is not science. Consensus is going with the opinion of a majority, but not without trying to accommodate the objections of the minority. Science is the action of always seeking to disprove a theory, not prop one up. However, additional historical observation provides examples where we eventually get to the point where we discard the bad science and erroneous theories as they have been disproven over and over. And we only keep the theories that stand the test of time. And in this way, institutions came to be seen as reliable. But that does not mean every theory coming out of a, quote, reliable institution is reliable in and of itself. Reliable science is an eventuality that comes from innumerable failed attempts to disprove it. And if scientists are not looking for ways to disprove a theory, we cannot be confident that such self-correction, getting rid of bad science and keeping reliable science, will inevitably occur. Let me say that again. If scientists are not looking for ways to disprove a theory, we cannot be confident that such self-correction, that of getting rid of bad science, will inevitably occur. But the assumption that science possesses a peculiar reliability not found in other forms of inquiry, because yes, historically, self-correction has happened, that assumption, however, has evolved into an assumption that all science is reliable. And then that has led many to identify that reliability, not with the science, not even with the theory, but instead with the institutions and practitioners of science. So what happens is that a predominantly justifiable admiration for the work scientists have historically performed has led to an unjustified admiration for scientists. And this is how a new religion emerged out of the pandemic. It was already at play, but the evangelists of this religion got quite a bit of airtime during the pandemic as Americans sought answers to quell their fear of suffering and dying. And these evangelists use this airtime to claim authority over all things. In the mind of society, science has become the most reliable arbiter of truth. And even when a scientist's expertise is severely and specifically limited, the fact they are a scientist somehow trumps their area of expertise. I see this in academia all the time. For example, someone who has a PhD in history is not an expert in all of history. They simply have one very, 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 very small slice of history they are intimately and comprehensively familiar with. They are so knowledgeable about this slice of history, it does appear they know everything about it. But that area or slice is so minuscule when compared to the entirety of history. One cannot look at someone with a PhD in history and label them a history expert and believe they know everything there is to know about history. But the history expert actually believes that because they have so much in-depth knowledge and expertise in one minuscule area of history, they can be relied upon and should be looked to as an authority on all areas of history. But this is not true. Likewise, this is not true about biologists. This is not true about chemists. This is not true about physicists or even astrophysicists. Experts actually have a very, 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 very small area of expertise. Even virologists have a minute area of expertise. The same is true of epidemiologists. That is what makes them experts. Expertise makes them experts. But because they are experts, there are many who look to them as though they are the authority on all things, on everything related to any science. And this is what started happening on a mass societal scale. The public started believing that any claim held up by many scientists, or simply based on language and ideas that sounded sufficiently similar to scientific theories, is the truth. And this is where we drift away from science into scientism, that new religion.